Well, thank you to all of you here. And it's really like a feast to have the CEPREVE and ESPON, and it's like a party, no? And having representatives of the European Union, OECD, Emilio Fontella and Antonio Pulido would be very proud. I think it's great, very fortunate. It's also very fortunate that you have been reflecting on the state of the national and international economy. And here we're talking about these flows, which luckily are available to all. And what we wanted now was to synthesize the effort that we made of creating scenarios. Although we have an hour to do this, we don't have time to tell about all the scenarios. I'm going to try to mention what I think is most important. Everything I'm going to show is not something that I've done myself. I'm really like a spokesman for all of the people who've worked on this. I've divided the presentation in two parts for two reasons. First, I had to first explain what the ESPON project had done, but since many of you have already heard part of this presentation in different places as we obtain results, I think I needed to give it some value. And in this first part of the presentation, I'm going to summarize the two main scenarios which are relevant today, which was the COVID shock and how the next generation funds could affect European economies. And on that layer, we're going to say how we saw in April that there could be an influence on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. This is going to provide us a synthetic vision. We did this in May in Lille, and we're going to summarize this here. What we were saying in April, and the second part of the presentation is where we can say, well, what's happened since April, and what did we suppose at that time? Was it logical? What is happening? So the idea is to an interim ex post analysis of because we still haven't gone through that first year of the simulations that we're doing, and we're going to focus on the inflation and other trade indicators. And the idea is not to give results, but also to offer data that weren't there before, and which is very important to have them in the agenda if we want to know what's going to happen. And then I also wanted to make some general reflections. So what can we do? These are the logos of the institutions. Here you have the old logo. Yesterday we explained that one of the main contributions of the project was the extension of the input-output tables of Euregio 2017, which had been carried out together with the JRC IPTS. This is the most powerful framework we have right now at the European level to have both general and sector specific analysis. So we have these countries which are the European Union, the EU 27 plus the other 4 countries. We carried out simulations to look at the economic effect of the European Green Deal, new globalization. We thought it was a euphemism. We didn't want to talk about protectionism. Anybody who's not talking about, who doesn't want to talk about protectionism has a problem. But a year ago, we were talking about this new globalization, the economic impact of COVID-19, and how it could affect the next generation and the Ukrainian conflict. With regard to COVID, I'm going to try to be synthetic. We're coming from the greatest shock that we have had in the world, and Europe at least, since the Second World War. I'm going to talk about we were saved because we're here, and a lot of people have been left on this side, and the same thing happened with the economy. But the shock has been truly brutal. But since we're vaccinated and so on, then we don't need to. The GDP fell 10%, which was 6 points more than in 2008, and it's taken us over 10 years to get over 2008. Next Generation is the largest fund package ever agreed at the European Union, because it matches the shock we experienced, but it's a special package which responds to a new sector policy in the European Union. It's territorial, but mainly sectoral, and particularly in the digital areas and in green areas. What we want is to use the input tables from 2017 to simulate that effect. First, we will simulate a negative effect, because in April we did not know at the regional level what the impact of COVID had been. Even today we don't really know the real, both on the supply and demand side, so we don't know the effects, the true effects. We have to see how much COVID impacted in 2020. And then we're going to do a simulation exercise. What would happen if we distributed the Next Generation funds territorially and sectorally according to different criteria, because we're still waiting for a large part of these funds. And the ones that are arriving, at least here in this country, we can't figure out how to spend them. We're not trying to predict, but we want to create a what-if situation. What would we do if we had that money right now? Since we've heard, we think the Next Generation funds are cohesion plus funds. They're not. Northern countries didn't want them to be. And this is the first message I wanted to transmit. The European funds, they're designed along these pillars. A very high percentage has to go to green transitions and to digital. The axis of the cohesion is only one of the axes. Afterwards, countries within that have made their proposals, and each one has taken positions as in an open area. And the only thing that is fixed, what maximum of Next Generation funds each country can have. And this uses a formula that includes the reverse per capita income. Poorer people receive more. And also the damage in terms of GDP in 2020. Putting in GDP, we find that there's a bias where the poorest people receive the most, but the poorest have suffered more. At least the Italy and Spain and some Eastern countries. So this relation is clearly negative. This is the only thing that we know. And each country distributes it supposedly, or territories manage a significant percentage with some sort of territorial structure. So we calculated the negative shock. We took the input-output tables for the economy. We do the distribution, knowing how much each national GDP has fallen in 2020. We see how each value added has fallen in Europe in 2020. What's the positive shock? Well, the only thing we know is the maximum number size of the funds that is going to arrive at each country. We divide that into three criteria, or among three criteria. In an open discussion among all of us, we said, well, what's going to happen? The first is status quo. It's going to go to the people who normally handle it. There's not going to be a radical transformation of the economy, not in the short term. The more powerful sectors, the more powerful regions, the most powerful companies are the ones that are going to get those funds. So using the 2017 input-output tables, depending on the specific weight of each sector and each region in the investment, and according to that structure, we have the same distribution. But we're expecting a change in level, but certainly not an economic transition. The second is damage restitution. If the funds were to get out of the COVID hole, then we want to redistribute them territorially within each country according to criteria to the similar to that which the Commission has convened with the countries based on who has suffered the most. And then the third one, let's get on the side of frugal countries, the ones who propose that this is a sectoral industrial policy. It's a question of all growing more, not only poor countries, poor territories, and not necessarily curing wounds, if you wish. So this is purely sectoral, and the money is going to go to green, to resilience, and to digital. Here we have the sector breakdown, and the territorial result comes out as a result. But it's the sector that rules. So what's the impact of COVID? National data are well known. It's like this is like a weather map. We've had this terrible storm has left these disastrous consequences in two countries. Yeah, the impact was here. We see damage in those countries that depended more on mobility and tourism. It's logical to have the damage from south to west, and we don't see that much. This is the summer storm. That's the impact. The way that funds were distributed. We know what each country is going to get. We assume everybody's going to spend the money. In the status quo, it looks like everything is the same. Everyone should look at their country. If we look at Spain, in the status quo, the richest areas win. Where are the builders that do green, that do digital, Madrid, Barcelona. From a point of view of damage restitution, who has been damaged the most? The Canary Islands, the coastal regions, and the areas with a lower GDP. Here, Madrid, Catalonia, Basque Country, and Navarre are not going to appear. If we leave if we have a truly industrial policy, we give it to who can make things grow more. And then again, most funds are going to go to Madrid, Catalonia, Basque Country, and Navarre. It's going to go anti-cohesion. These and this one are anti-cohesion. This one is pro-cohesion. And we have a debate. I think we'd have as many points of view as there are people here. If we mix the negative with a positive effect, the first, what do you see? More green or more orangey red? More orangey red. Green is the net effect is positive. Next generations are capable of covering the fall of the GDP created by the summer storm. But if you see more orange and red, is that next generation are going to alleviate us, but they're not going to pull us out of the situation. Not immediately. Or not... but you're also going to see color changes. You're going to see that Madrid is more yellow than in damaged institution. Basque Country is not alleviated, much alleviated by next generation. If those who suffered took it, if tourism was in the Canary Islands and Valencia, and they're going to have greater participation, but this is probably, this is not going to happen. The message is clear, I think. So, in conclusion, the next generation funds, looking at focusing on the grants, are not sufficient to cover the great negative shock of COVID. Many regions are negative with regard to results with these mathematics, which are not all. And the negative shock is certain, and we're being positive about the positive shock. And then there's also variability. But there's we're in the middle of the film. We have some positive aspects that we haven't considered. This is simulation, static simulation. We didn't take into account the loans. I don't know if anybody's going to dare to ask for loans with the winter storm that's coming. So this should be like a carrot beyond the grants. It's being used like the carrot and stick, so the countries can grow. And the Bank of Spain says that there's for structural funds are providing better support than the new green funds. I don't know if we're going in the direction of more growth. We could debate that. Here are elements that could be pro-positive, pro-negative. And we're folding the umbrella from the summer storm, and then we get the winter storm. I don't have to explain. The background, everything has to do with... I'm going to focus on the more miserable side, or more. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to be talking about Russia and the Ukraine. I'm going to talk about us, and I apologize for that, but we have to do it. We have that responsibility. In April, we were not going to predict. We were going to simulate, because we had no idea. The project was almost closed, and there was an addendum And we said we can't close this project without saying something about what is going to happen. And I said, well, okay, let's do something in 2 months. But we knew nothing at that point. We knew very little. What did we know? We knew that Russia and the Ukraine were two economies. Ukraine is not in the input-output tables, world input-output tables. We had to invent it in 15 days. The Russian one was there. Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of territory. In population, it's large, 146 million. But in terms of GDP, it's like Spain or Italy, a medium-range country. So what is the problem? The problem is that it's a super strategic country because of what it produces and what it supplies. And we have in their power, particularly in Germany, and we had this tremendous dependence on petroleum and gas. And then we had all the market and those strategic markets of digital transformation. They require nickel, palladium, fertilizers. And then the Ukraine also is a single crop country, but that's why it's one of the world's top. It's the world's top cereal supplier. So also some industrial products. If there were few people in the party, we said, okay, we're not going to intervene, but we're going to start an economic war. What we knew in April, the third package of measures of the European Union, which included commerce, finance, surgical interventions against specific individuals and companies. And we put a lot of emphasis on economically strangling Russia and blocking their assets, disconnecting their connection with international finance. Fine. We'll see how that has progressed. What happened since then? What we saw in April, it was this. Now we're approving the 9th package of measures against Russia. But all countries are joining certain sanctions. In many it's affecting a lot of your companies. Can I export? Can I import? Can I travel there? Can I not? Hey, all my helicopters are Russian, one man was saying, and I'm putting wildfires out in Spain, and all the parts are Russian. He was a pilot, but they're dramatic things that, yeah, I mean, sanctions are fine, but those helicopters are Russian. What did we do? We had a simulation of two effects: the demand and the effect on the commerce side, and another one on the price side. The prices create a second effect on consumption, and this has a total effect. And this is a maximum effect. We proposed various scenarios for that temporary shock. Thinking it was in April, so we were going for a year to April 2023. What was the simulation of the trade commerce? Well, that was the easiest we could think about. We didn't have that much experience in wars. What happens in a war? Well, you stop consuming, you stop selling, you stop buying. And if we have sanctions where we say we're not going to buy anything from you and we're not going to sell anything from you, to you, then that's what's going to happen. So the most radical is that all flows from Russia to Russia and the Ukraine happened. That's what they told us in April. What was the price shock? All the prices shot up of all raw materials that are tied to Russia. Julian started working with all the micro indicators of all commodities. Metals had gone up 18%, coal up 97%, oil 30%, electricity and gas 45%, and agricultural products 32%. So we're going to maintain this rise all year. We expect that for the rest of the year, prices will not come down. That's going to be a cost push in the input-output table, where the whole world is going to fit in. We're talking about a pass-through. Here we have an absolute pass-through. All costs are transmitted to all value chains, all countries in the world, and in your region, your sector, it will affect you more or less depending on your dependence on Russia and its sectors. Now we said, okay, let's imagine that people cannot these products that they cannot stop consuming these products. I can't stop consuming Russian oil if I have no other pipeline bringing oil from anywhere else. If the cost of energy, we're certainly not going to go on holiday, so we won't buy any clothes. Energy is going to go up. We're going to spend more money on energy, and we reduce other aspects. This is not a simulation. This is data. These are the input-output tables, and when we have this, how all European regions are tied to Russia in exports and imports. From exports. The closest countries are selling more to Russia. That's why we have darker greens. But Ireland and Portugal have very strong ties to Russia, tied to real estate, tourism, and air transport. And that's going to appear in the map. And it was not foreseeable. Imports will depend on energy. There's more dependence. There are countries that depend more on Russian imports than on the Western country. What happens if Russia and the Ukraine stop trading with the world? So those the effect on trade. This is the winter. The winter storm comes from Siberia, and it affects you. Where does it affect you? Since there were greater ties, depending on, with some exceptions in Ireland, some exceptions in Portugal, the impact gets here. What's the effect of inflation? Well, there it's not so obvious, but there's a proximity effect. But there's the peninsular uniqueness in the Iberian Peninsula, which is not as affected as Spain and Portugal are. When we take these two GDP fall due to inflation, that creates where we're mixing inflation with consumption. We have more uniformity. When we mix trade and price, we see a mixture of these two effects, supposing that the two were the highest. And we see that the exposure of Portugal, Ireland, Sweden, and Eastern countries and Germany is also quite powerfully affected. Conclusion. What we said in April was that in the worst scenario, we expect the economy, assuming the positive taxes that we had forecasts of 3%, 4%. On that, we had to deduct that 1.8% moderation, and that could cause almost 4 million jobs and 3 additional inflation points on the inflation that the European Union had before in February 2022. With that time modulation of the effect, we had more lukewarm scenarios where we had the drop was minus 0.5 or 0.6. We're talking about 800,000 jobs, and prices rising about 1.3%. In April, I don't know if you thought that it was a very negative or very positive outlook, but an important point is that the trade effect was more powerful than the price effect. And then we saw that the trade effect, in the trade effect, it was not direct effect, but rather the mixture that we're going to get through indirect effects. And here, an example of this would be Germany. Here we had this. Being in Navarre, I wanted to recover this. Here we have the summer storm. The royalties of the next generation, and then the winter storms. And we have a ranking. According to this simulation, Ceuta and Melilla, they would actually have positive effects. They're going to get, I'm looking the most pro-cohesions. If you're poorest, you're going to get more funds. I don't think it will happen. But we get this ranking. There are three regions that are the most damaged. We're the most industrial. We are super tied to Germany through the automotive sector. We're joined to the Basque Country, and the Basque Country also exports. Catalonia is also a great exporter. So where are we going to get the highest effect? COVID, a very negative effect on this region. The next generations that they would get, if it was pro-cohesion, is going to be large, but it's not going to cover everything. The blanket will only reach your knees. With the COVID plus next generation, you're talking about minus 4.41. This is if we're starting from zero. If we add the winter storm, they're not going to be that damaged, but they were coming out of GDP drop of around minus 5. And, in April, we were saying, yeah, but we're going to grow. They're telling us we're going to grow about 3%. And you're telling us we're going to fall by 6%. So the conclusions were Europe is looking for a new steady state. And we're comparing it, 2019 is just not coming back. And we don't know what the new steady state is going to be. we have the all the international all the growth forecasts. To summarize the message, in inflation, I think we were short. We thought that inflation was a temporary thing, and not only is it not temporary, but it's been stronger. And we have a contractive monetary policy. The rules of the game have changed. We have tension, which is the typical equity and cohesion kind of tension. Here we have security, and this changes everything. If we have to take into account the expense on defending our on defense and maybe breaking relations with some partners, and and this is going to it's going to fire up the problems that we were already had, which was the European strategic autonomy and the European Green Deal. What happens since?
So this is an ex post analysis that's it's partial and it's precarious. So a little patience with this, please. Yeah, just bear that in mind. Yeah, so there's no regional data in Europe on GDP or unemployment, or so we're a bit blind here. Yeah, so we don't know what's going to happen. So what we've done is compare the simulation with the current situation in country terms. So this is what we've got the data for. So we've got a ranking of the total effects, in the simulation, where we mix the trade and the price effects. Cyprus, Lithuania, So the maximum falls will be a little bit more than -6, but everything will be negative. Yeah. So what's actually happening? So this has been done quite quickly, quite roughly, but we looked here at the GDPs. The third quarter, where Eurostat doesn't have data for every country for the third quarter, but here's where you can see this little box. If I don't have it for third quarter, I'll put the second quarter. So it's a bit of a mixture of what we know and what we don't know. And as this is calculated in variation rates from pre-war, so I'm going to take away the annual growth rate from now, from what was predicted in the first quarter. So we're looking at the negative impact and how this is going to affect the economies in the EU. We're going to compare it from before the war to what we see now. So in Poland, for example, their GDP is falling by more than -6. So it matches more or less, but in places like Cyprus, and the maximum drops. In Poland, where we had -2.5, so it's more than doubled that. Yeah, that's the real effect. Ireland, we didn't expect it, but we've simulated it. There's something with Ireland that is tied to Europe, to Russia, that we didn't realize. It was simulated, and it's happening. Portugal, the same. We didn't expect it. We don't know why, but there it is. We don't know why. Maybe the Russians are buying property on the Algarve or whatever it is, but something's happening there. Yeah. Strange things. Let's have a look. There's some positive effects. Yeah. There are some countries that are activating their bigger exploitations of oil and gas, to substitute the Russian supplies. So we can see so they're going to win in this storm, if you want, in this winter storm. So in prices, we need to ask Julian, have we continued updating the indicators? And he said, yes. Here it is. We did this yesterday. We saw this yesterday. So from the second date, it's April. So if you look where we are, we're here. The red line is the average for the whole post-war period, and this is the relation of the prices. So in general, the situation's a little bit intermediate, but the dramatic part is in the most strategic products, to energy. The shock that we're expecting hasn't really happened. So the price of oil has continued going up, coal, gas. So we're predicting a figure, and it's continued to rise. But in copper and aluminium, all of that, it hasn't. They've gone under. But they're less strategic. Yeah, so the energy prices have continued to rise beyond our expectations. So what can we see with today's data? Here's the ranking, the inflation shock. We've got the simulation, and we've got and Bulgaria. Yeah, we're looking at 6% in Bulgaria, and then in the current situation, it hasn't really happened. So having done the same for the current situation, for the price index that came out in September, and calculating the rate from September and the annual rate, comparing it with February, and that's the orange bar that you can see. And so we can see interesting things. Hungary, Bulgaria. Inflation rates of 10, 12, 13%, way above what we were simulating. And this is just 6 months of shock. So we've still got until April next year. No, it's going to get worse. So Spain, let's look at Spain. It's really interesting because we're looking good in terms of inflation. It didn't arrive. Yeah, the rate of inflation in September and February, we're in the best situation in all of Europe. Yeah, the situation comes from before. It comes from COVID. Yeah. Yeah, so this is really interesting. The map here, we can see, this is what we simulated on the left, and this is what we can see. Yeah, in terms of inflation, there's still strange things that we didn't predict, Portugal, Ireland, and we can see the cold gradient. So we can't stay with the simulation. We can't keep the simulation that we had for the trade effect. So what did we do in the summer? So we did 3 alternative simulations. One that was completely logic. Yeah. The first one. So we're going to look at the US and the EU and the possibility that they cancel all trade with Russia. And Russia wakes up and trades with the rest of the world. The second one here is there's a lot of politics in this. And so the US and the EU cut all trade apart from oil and gas, apart from the strategic trade. And Russia does all its trade. Russia doesn't cut its trade with China or India. And then the fourth scenario here is possibly what Putin wants, that everything that was bought from Europe by Russia went to Europe, and everything that was sold, now it's all going to go to non-NATO countries, so China and whoever, and India. So there's a deviation in the market. So what Russia no longer buys from one side, they buy from another. And so right now we're in number 2, we're cancelling energy. So in summary, these are the ranking of the most affected and the least affected. It's really hard to see. I'm going to put the Spanish one up soon. Yeah, but but we're going to stay in the less affected countries in Europe. What we can see is, in general, is the biggest shock was in April. The little blue circles, and the orange ones is the least negative. And here I can see. Well, I suppose you feel the same way that I do, and think, "Whoa, great!" But great for who? As a consumer, or that we've got a lesser impact, or is it that Russia's avoiding sanctions? It's not. We're not strangling. We're not suffocating the Russian economy, and we're paying for it ourselves. Yeah, we're paying the price. So when we look at this, let's look at the regions here in Spain, and we're going to look at the Île-de-France around Paris and the Brussels region. I've also put in the Midi-Pyrénées, which is and Aquitaine, the southern France regions. So the impact is interesting. First of all, they're nearly all going to have like slight variations in their scenarios. Why? Because for us, the impact comes from the indirect shock. Yeah, no, the indirect shock. See, it affects Germany. It affects us. So the variation is big, but it's not from trade. The trade aspect the trade effect isn't going to affect us that greatly. Indirect trade with cut-off countries we can't escape that. So here's the ranking, and this is a representative photo. So here's Navarra, and the rest. So what's happening with trade? Is it being realistic that there won't be world trade? Well, there's a bit of everything. These are Bruegel data. So I want you to look out for indicators, yeah, that will be new or interesting or innovative, yeah. And we've got indicators that very frequently that we all need to have on our dashboards, yeah, to get through this crisis, yeah. Yeah, we're going to use Eurostat, but they all come really late, don't we? We need like immediate indicators. So in September, so with Bruegel, yeah, we get to September. So Russia's now cancelled all its stats. So yeah, we've got less data there. So we're going to get all our data from everywhere else, and we're going to deduce Russia's figures. So we can see the total of exports to Russia have gone down, but the minerals and fuels are resisting. Yeah, they're holding out, and the rest of the products are decreasing. So when we're looking at Russia's imports from the 34 selected countries, we see there's like a really sudden drop, and then it goes back up again. It picks up. By country, it's important here that prices are really going up. We're not talking about volume of trade and the compensation of their rising prices. So we're talking about business volume. So we're looking at there's a drop in the trade volume, but the rising prices compensate for this. So it's looking really good for Russia. What's happening? What about products that aren't minerals or mineral fuels? Well, here this has been another story. All the other exports to the Europe. Yeah, they're all falling, but have been doing for a while. By country. So we're talking about mineral fuels here. We're talking about energy. So there's been a pickup from China and India. So there's moments when the USA has maybe talked to India and to China and said, well, what's going on here? It seems like a Tom Clancy film. And then something happened there that we're not quite sure what's going on behind the scenes there. Other than minerals in the middle, so we can see Turkey. We're not sure whether this is some kind of an agreement, if it's like hanging out with the bad guy, or just to negotiate. But they've gained quite a lot of trade there. Yeah, Turkey's business activity is not dropping in the same way. In terms of Russian imports, it's very interesting. Everyone except the EU have greater imports from Russia. It's only the EU, including USA and the UK. So here's another very interesting indicator. Yeah. How can we explain to our people, to our taxpayers, if we want to use economic sanctions to finish the war, we need to be serious about it. So how do we explain? How do we put this across to our people? So this is tracking of they're tracking the ships that are carrying petrol and carrying oil, and they value them. So this is a counter. This is a daily counter for the value of the oil, and so they keep working on this idea, to put this idea across, to be able to justify what's happening to consumers. Yeah. So we can see the largest importers of fossil fuels from Russia. So we can see where Spain is, down here at the bottom. Here's another daily indicator. Very interesting. You can see like a slight downward move there. So it's a daily payment amounts by fuel type. You can see coal, gas and oil. Yeah, and here it is broken down. So clearly the EU is coming down there. Yeah, it's slowly, but they're weaning themselves off Russian fuels. Yeah, Putin is using the same lever on us. That. Another very interesting map here. Like all transmission channels are focused on 4 or 5 products that come in either by pipeline or by boat. So we need a daily indicator of what's happening in the ports. So here's a logistics indicator. Yeah, so here's the boats in real time. So they're focusing on St. Petersburg, Vladivostok, and Novorossiysk, and Odessa. So Odessa has dropped. Yeah, it's just like completely off the map. But others are going up. Yeah, so Russia is sending its oil by boat and gas by boat as well. Yeah, and this is a growing amount. Yeah, we're putting it as destination others. Yeah, and one of those includes Gibraltar. Yeah, I'm not going to put the cat amongst the pigeons, but Gibraltar's in there. Here's the pipelines that Russia uses to supply oil, in this case. So we're in the picture. Rotterdam, for example, and other ports. Yeah, the places where petrol normally joins the market. These are the maximums for 2021 and 2022. 2022 is above the previous year. And that's, we're looking at higher prices as well. And that's up until week 50, yeah? Talking about November, yeah? That's from Brugge. These graphs are also very interesting. The imports of natural gas from Russia until the 15th of November. So we've got a historical minimum, which is the dotted line, a maximum, historical maximum. So we're moving around the figures of the minimum. And then in 2022, it's obviously very, very dropping. It's not because the EU has forbidden to buy gas, but Putin has cut off his gas supply to the rest of Europe. At the same time, plus we can talk about Norway here, that is growing, and we're talking about the maximum supply amounts for them, and the energy is gas is off the mark. Yeah, it's massive amounts. Yeah, from Tajikistan, from Algeria. So this map seems really interesting to me. We need to have it on the table in these next months. Here we're talking about the pipes. Yeah, the Nord Stream has been we've disconnected it. Ukrainian transit is another but it's also zero. Yeah, the line that goes via Poland and Yemen, Putin's cut it off. What's happening with Turkestan? It's massive. It's over the maximum levels. What about liquid gas? What about this gas storage? Well, we've got historical highs. So we've got a different type of distribution. Yeah, different type of supply. What about financial flows? I'm not an expert in this. So this has come from the International Settlements Bank. So looking at Russia. So Russian finance is dropping, but China, we're looking at syndicated loans by bank nationality, and China is breathing life into the system after all the other countries have dropped back. Russia is very smart in how it manages its financial blocks. It's always done it very well. So yeah, the ruble, they were dropped, but now it's gone its way back up again. So they've been very smart in terms of their finances. Yeah. So look at future research here. Yeah, it's true that we've made some mistakes. Yeah, in terms of our trade, it's not been as fast as we wanted to in the first 6 months. There's a European agreement to stop all ties in December, and we talked about dropping our rates of consumption. What we're left with now is looking at the simulations and the alternative simulations of cutting supplies. Well, these things are going to have to happen. In 6 months, we're in a negative situation, then something's going to have to change. Yeah, in trade, we haven't gone far enough. Yeah, and we've also added the pressure of humanitarian politics. Yeah. What can we add here to continue simulating this? We can look at trade with China, Turkey, India, and how they're cushioning the blow for Russia. So we're not having the effect that we want. So we're looking at a deviation of trade. And we can incorporate the effects of the interest rate rises and talk about the new deals. Thank you. If anybody has a very quick question, we've just got time. I suppose if there aren't many questions, then they'll come out in the panel session later. Yeah. I don't know if Julian would like to add anything to what you said yesterday. We've gone really fast here. Some of the messages that I've given don't coincide entirely with him, but the message completely matches with what we were saying. Don't worry, what we were talking about yesterday. And later Jorge is going to come in. He's going to add more fuel to this fire. So yeah, we're not predicting here. We're simulating, but what we're sketching is what we see right now. It's like the weather today. Yeah, that we've got rainy days ahead.